It was a hot afternoon in San Diego, and the sun was high above the city like a spotlight. The beach was only a block away, and the gym near the boardwalk was packed with sweaty tourists and loud locals. People in tank tops and gym shorts stood in groups, laughing, drinking smoothies, and showing off their muscles. Among them stood 4 men, all bulky, loud, and full of themselves. They blocked the entrance to the gym, not caring that people had to walk around them. To them, the sidewalk was theirs, like they owned the place from a distance. A woman walked slowly toward the entrance. She wore black leggings, a gray hoodie with the hood up, and carried a small gym bag in her hand. She was not tall, not muscular, and didn't seem like someone who would lift heavy weights. Most people didn't even notice her, but those 4 men did. As she came closer, she stopped politely and said in a quiet voice, "Excuse me." One of the men turned, looked her up and down, and smirked. "Did you hear something?" he asked his friend, pretending not to notice her. The others laughed, making jokes, calling her names like Mouse and Jim Bunny. She stayed calm, repeated, "Excuse me, I need to get through." One of them, the tallest, stepped aside just a little, but not enough for her to pass easily. Still, she didn't complain. She tried to squeeze through the narrow gap between 2 of them. That's when it happened. The man on her left, pretending to stretch, suddenly brought his elbow out. It hit her right in the face, hard and sharp. The impact made her head jerk back slightly, and her hood fell off. Her gym bag dropped to the ground. The man laughed and said, "Oops, didn't see you there." She stood still for a second, one hand touching her cheek. There was a small red mark, but she didn't cry or scream. She looked at the man who hit her, then looked down, picked up her bag, and walked into the gym. No shouting, no threats, no drama. Just silence. The group laughed again, high-fiving and calling her weak. "Didn't even fight back," one of them said. "Bet she came here to do yoga," another one joked. They thought the story ended there, but they didn't see the young man sitting on a bench across the street. He had been filming the whole thing on his phone. He had seen the way the woman stayed calm. He had also seen the cruel smirk on the man's face when his elbow connected. The video was less than 30 seconds long, but powerful. The young man uploaded the clip that night with the title, "They elbowed her in the face and laughed." Big mistake? At first, only a few people watched it, but something about the way the woman reacted caught people's attention. The internet started to ask questions. Why didn't she hit back? Who is she? She didn't look scared. Just patient. Comments flooded in. Some said it was sad, others were angry, but many felt there was something more behind her silence. "She moved like someone trained," one viewer wrote. "She didn't flinch." "That's discipline," another said. Some even claimed they recognized her. Wasn't she a former military officer? Or something more? The mystery grew, and so did the views. By the next morning, the video had reached 100,000 views, and someone finally said the words that changed everything. "I think that's Maya Jensen." The name didn't mean much to most people, but to those who knew, that name meant one thing. Navy SEAL back at the gym. The 4 men didn't know their world was about to change. They were still laughing, still mocking, still proud. They had no idea who Maya was or what she had done in her life. They thought they had elbowed a harmless woman, but what they had actually done was mess with a warrior. A storm was coming, not with fists, but with quiet power. The kind of power that doesn't need to scream to be heard. The kind that waits, watches, and then strikes when the lesson will last forever. And it all started with that one elbow. That one careless moment. That mistake they would never forget. Maya Jensen looked like any other woman you'd pass on the street. She wore plain clothes, didn't wear makeup, and always kept her hair tied back. She drove a quiet silver car, lived in a small apartment, and walked her dog every evening. To her neighbors, she was polite but private, kind but distant. To the gym goers, she was that quiet woman who keeps to herself. Nobody knew who she really was, and that was exactly how she wanted it. What people didn't know was that Maya had once been a ghost. Not a spirit, but the kind of person who disappears into countries without names, who speaks when ordered and vanishes when done. She was a United States Navy SEAL, trained in sea, air, and land operations. She had worn camouflage, night vision goggles, and sometimes even disguises, but the best disguise she ever wore was now, just being invisible. Maya had seen war up close, not in movies, but in reality. She had rescued hostages from caves and mountains. She had dragged injured soldiers out of burning buildings. She had been shot at, left behind, and still kept going. But all of that was hidden beneath her calm face. She didn't wear her medals, she didn't tell her stories. Because real warriors don't boast, they carry their silence like armor. When she left the SEALs after 12 long years, she didn't cry, she simply saluted the flag, shook hands with her commander, and walked away. Her file was sealed, her missions classified, and her name was quietly removed from any public record. Now, she was just Maya, the quiet woman at the gym who stayed in the corner, who warmed up alone, trained with discipline, and left without a sound. But inside her, the fire never went out. That's why the elbow didn't break her, it awakened her. She hadn't been looking for trouble that day. She hadn't even looked the man in the eyes when it happened. But something inside her clicked, like a switch she thought was buried. Not anger, not revenge, just readiness. Like a lion hearing a distant roar and slowly rising, the video of that moment kept growing. By the next morning, it had crossed 1 million views. People were digging, asking, searching, who is this woman? And finally, someone from the military side confirmed it in a comment. She's one of ours, SEAL teammate Maya J. That one message changed everything. Suddenly, people stopped calling her weak. They started calling her dangerous. The comments shifted from jokes to shock. She didn't even react. That's next-level control. Man elbowed a Navy SEAL in the face and lived. Barely. But the most common comment was this. She could have destroyed him. And she chose not to. Respect. The men who hit her hadn't seen the video yet. They were busy posting their own selfies and gym videos, still bragging, still flexing. They didn't know their victim was more trained than any of them. They didn't know she had once fought 3 armed men in a dark alley and walked away without a scratch. They didn't know she had spent nights in freezing deserts and hot jungles, or that she could break a man's arm in 4 seconds flat. Maya saw the video the next day. She didn't flinch, didn't even press play more than once. She looked at the comments, saw her name, and sighed. She didn't want to be famous. She just wanted peace, but peace, she knew, must sometimes be earned. Later that evening, she opened a locked box under her bed. Inside were her service pins, her folded flag and her SEAL trident. She picked it up, held it in her hand, and stared at it for a long time. Then she whispered to herself, maybe it's time. She put the badge in her gym bag, not to fight, not to scare, but to remind herself who she was. Because sometimes the past doesn't come back to haunt you. It comes back to guide you. That night she didn't sleep much. Her mind played the same scene over and over, the elbow, the laughter, the silence, but in her heart, something stronger was building. Not anger, not fear, just quiet purpose. She wasn't going to attack anyone, but she was going to show them what a real warrior looked like. She wasn't going to use fists. She was going to use presence. And the next day, when she walked back into that same gym, carrying nothing but her old dog tag and that same calm look, the air changed before she even spoke, because even without a uniform, Maya Jensen was never just a woman. She was a storm in human form. And they were about to find out why hitting a Navy SEAL was a mistake that would echo far beyond a parking lot. By the time Maya Jensen walked into the gym again, the internet had already caught fire. The video of her getting elbowed had now crossed 5 million views. What started as a short clip recorded by a stranger had now become a trending story across social media. People weren't just watching, they were investigating, they were angry, curious, and shocked. The title of the video had changed 3 times. First, it was "They elbowed her in the face and laughed." Then it became, "Wait, she's a Navy SEAL?" And finally, the title that stuck was, "The calm before the storm, you don't mess with Maya Jensen." People from the military started commenting. Former SEALs, Marines, even Air Force veterans. One comment stood out more than the rest. It said, "She trained us in combat drills in '09. We called her Iron Ghost," another wrote. Maya never needed to raise her voice to be heard. Her silence said everything. Reporters reached out to the gym, but the gym had no comment. The men in the video had no idea what storm was coming. They hadn't even watched the video yet. They thought the woman they elbowed had simply disappeared. They believed the moment had passed, but that moment was only the beginning. Maya had not come to fight. She had not come to shame anyone. She came to show something far more powerful. Grace under pressure. She walked in the same way she always did. Same hoodie, same gym bag, same quiet face, but this time, something was different. People noticed her. Not because she demanded attention, but because the energy around her had changed. It wasn't loud, it was sharp, still, and undeniable, like the feeling you get before a storm hits. The kind of silence that makes even the strongest people pause. The front desk manager nodded nervously when he saw her. He had seen the video, and he knew who she was now. "Welcome back, Miss Jensen," he said quietly. She nodded and walked past him without a word. Inside the gym, the four men were laughing near the punching bags, still talking about weekend plans and showing off their routines. One of them spotted Maya walking in and nudged his friend. "Look who's back," he smirked. They had no idea. No idea that the crowd around them wasn't staring at them anymore. It was staring at her. Maya walked up to the main mat area, where classes usually took place. She placed her bag down, unzipped it, and pulled out a small metal object. She didn't raise it, didn't show it off. She simply set it down on the floor. A worn Navy SEAL Trident badge. No words, no speeches, just truth. The gym went quiet. Even the music stopped as if the air itself was listening. People froze, phones came out, and whispers started. "That's real," someone whispered. Another said, "Oh my God, it's her." The four men didn't laugh this time. Their faces went pale. One of them tried to speak, but no words came out. Maya slowly turned to look at them. Not with anger, but with calm. Her eyes didn't scream revenge. They said something even more dangerous, I remember. The gym owner came out of his office, phone in hand. He had just gotten off a call from someone in the Navy, someone high up. He walked over to Maya and said quietly, "Would you like to press charges?" She looked at him for a long second and shook her head. "No," she said gently. "I'd rather educate." That sentence was like thunder. It echoed across the room louder than any punch. She didn't need violence to make a point. She had already won. Without lifting a finger, she had flipped the story. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the leader. And everyone saw it. A young girl in the corner, no older than 16, watched Maya with wide eyes. She leaned toward her mother and whispered, "I want to be like her." In that moment, Maya did more than just return to a gym. She became a symbol. The gym owner, moved by her words, made an announcement on the spot. He said, "We're offering a free self-defense seminar next week, hosted by Miss Jensen." The crowd clapped. People cheered, and even some cried. But the four men who had laughed before, they quietly left the gym without saying a word. No more jokes, no more noise, just regret walking out the door. Outside, reporters were waiting. Cameras pointed toward the entrance, hoping for a quote or a headline. But Maya didn't stop. She walked past them like she had walked past everything else. Calm, focused, and unshaken, because this story was never about revenge. It was about something stronger, something the world had forgotten. Real strength doesn't shout, it stands, quietly and never backs down. The gym was silent that morning, the air heavy like a storm about to break. People whispered Maya Jensen's name as if it were something sacred. She didn't walk in like a soldier or a celebrity. She walked in like herself, calm and collected. But beneath that calm was a power that could not be ignored. The four men who had mocked her were all there again. They had seen the viral video now, and the truth hit them like a wave. The woman they had laughed at was not just any woman. She was a Navy SEAL, a warrior who had faced death more times than they had faced gym mirrors. They wanted to disappear, but fate had other plans. Maya stood at the center of the mat. Stretching quietly, she didn't even look at them, but her presence filled the room. It wasn't the kind of presence that screamed. It was the kind that made people lower their voices without realizing why. The gym owner approached, nervous but respectful. "Maya," he said softly, "thank you for coming again. Everyone's been talking about you." She smiled faintly. "Let them talk," she said, "but today, let's teach." He nodded quickly, understanding that she wasn't here to punish. She was here to show word had spread fast by noon. The gym was packed with people, students, trainers, even reporters. Phones were recording, lights were flashing, and the energy was electric. The four men stood at the back, unsure if they should stay or leave, but before they could move, Maya turned and looked straight at them. Her eyes met theirs, not with anger, but with quiet authority. "You gentlemen," she said, her voice calm and steady, "would you help me with a small demonstration?" It wasn't a question. It was an invitation wrapped in a challenge. They hesitated, but under dozens of eyes. They couldn't refuse one of them. The same man who had elbowed her stepped forward, trying to act brave. "Sure," he said, forcing a grin, "but go easy on me, all right?" A few people laughed nervously. Maya nodded once. "Of course," she said softly. She walked toward him, standing just a few feet away. "Okay," she said. "You're stronger, taller, heavier. Let's see how you'd attack." He frowned. Unsure if she was serious, she nodded again, encouraging. "Go ahead, just grab me. Don't hit, just try to control me." He reached out, confident that his size alone would overpower her. In less than 2 seconds, he was on the ground, face down, one arm pinned behind his back. The crowd gasped, phones went up, and someone shouted, "What just happened?" Maya stepped back and helped him up like a teacher. "Balance," she said. "Not brute force." He rubbed his shoulder, stunned. "I didn't even see it." Another man stepped forward, embarrassed but determined. "I bet you can't do that twice," he said. Maya smiled gently. "You're right," she said. "This time, I'll make it faster." He lunged. She sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and twisted. He fell to his knees before his brain could understand what happened. "Pain doesn't need permission," she said quietly. The audience erupted in applause, but Maya raised a hand for silence. "This isn't about showing off," she said. "It's about awareness." She turned to the crowd and spoke with calm strength. "Every person has power, but most never learn how to control it." She paced slowly, her words sinking deep. "I've fought men twice my size, armed and ready. But the deadliest fights I ever faced were against my own anger." The crowd went silent again. Even the reporters lowered their cameras for a moment. Because her voice wasn't just teaching, it was healing. She wasn't humiliating anyone, she was guiding them. Then she said something that made everyone in the room stop breathing. "The man who elbowed me," she said, glancing toward him. "I forgive you." The man looked down, his face red, his eyes wet. He had expected hate, but instead she gave him dignity. That was her true strength, not in her muscles, but in her mercy. After the demonstration, people lined up to thank her, women, men, even kids who had come just to see what real courage looked like. The gym owner, holding back tears, told her, "Maya, you just changed how this place will teach forever." She nodded. "Then it was worth it," she said simply. When she left the gym that day, the crowd followed her to the door. Phones were still recording, but now, it wasn't for gossip, it was for respect. And as she walked down the street, the man who once hit her stood silently at the window, watching the person he had mocked walk away like a hero. He whispered quietly, "I hit a Navy SEAL, and she still had the heart to forgive me." That night, clips of the demonstration filled every corner of the internet. The caption said, "She didn't fight back to win, she taught to heal." And under it, millions of people commented the same thing. True strength is silent. The next morning, the gym's parking lot was full before sunrise. Cars lined up along the street and people stood outside in quiet anticipation. They weren't here to lift weights or run laps. They came for one reason. Maya Jensen word had spread like wildfire. Her live demonstration, her calm power, and her quiet forgiveness had struck a nerve across the country. Clips of her disarming the men without anger were now on every social media platform. But what people talked about even more was her final line, "I forgive you." That sentence had become a headline. It was printed on t-shirts, posters, and banners, not in bold red letters like a warning, but in soft blue like a whisper that still shook the world. People didn't just want to meet Maya. They wanted to learn from her because, for the first time, they saw someone strong enough to crush her enemies, yet wise enough to lift them instead. The gym owner walked through the crowd, overwhelmed and speechless. He had run this place for 12 years, but never had he seen such unity, such stillness, such focus. "Everyone's here for her?" he asked one of the trainers. The trainer nodded. She turned this gym into something else now. Inside, Maya was already preparing the space. She wore the same hoodie, the same calm expression. But today, she carried something different in her eyes. Purpose. She rolled out mats, adjusted the microphone, and greeted each person as they walked in. No security, no big speeches, just eye contact and a gentle nod. Among the crowd were women of all ages. College girls, working mothers, elderly women holding canes. There were also men, quiet, respectful, curious. Even children stood near the front, eyes wide with admiration. Everyone had come to hear what this silent warrior had to say. Maya walked to the center of the room. The lights dimmed just slightly. She took the microphone and paused. The room was quiet, not because someone asked for silence, but because her presence had earned it. "I didn't come here to talk about fighting," she said slowly. "I came here to talk about what it means to stand." Her voice was soft, yet every person could hear her, because her words weren't just heard, they were felt. She spoke about fear, not the kind in war zones, but the kind in everyday life. The fear of walking alone at night, the fear of speaking up when someone crosses a line, the fear of looking weak when you choose not to fight. "I was elbowed in the face," she said, and people nodded. "But I've faced worse," she added. "Worse is when you lose your voice, your space, your safety." She looked around the room, her gaze landing on each face. "But we don't have to live afraid," she said. "Strength is not about breaking others, it's about protecting peace." She then called for volunteers. One by one, people stepped forward. She taught them how to break free from grips, how to use body weight to their advantage. She taught them how to breathe, how to stay grounded, and how to speak firmly without yelling. "No one ever taught me this," a young woman whispered. Maya smiled gently. "That's why I'm here," she said. By the end of the session, people weren't just clapping, they were transformed. 2 of the 4 men who had mocked her were there too. They stood at the back, their heads lowered. One of them raised his hand when Maya asked if anyone had questions. He cleared his throat and said softly, "I was one of them." The guys who laughed, gasps filled the room, but Maya raised her hand and signaled calm. He looked at her, voice shaking. "I didn't know who you were, and I was stupid. But watching you, it changed me." Maya nodded, not with judgment, but with grace. "Then let your change speak louder than your past," she replied. After the event, people stayed for hours. They didn't want autographs or selfies. They just wanted to tell her how much she had awakened in them. A mother told her, "I haven't felt strong in years until today," a teenager said. "I'm going to join self-defense classes now." And a man whispered, "You showed me that strength isn't shameful when it's quiet." The gym received over 400 emails that day. Requests came from schools, colleges, community centers. They all wanted Maya to come speak, to teach, to guide. They wanted the wake-up call to reach everyone. Not just those who saw the video. Maya sat in the corner that evening, drinking water and resting her feet. She didn't smile much, but her eyes softened. She hadn't planned this, hadn't chased the spotlight. All she had done was stand, but sometimes standing is enough to wake the world. And as the sun set behind the gym windows, a little girl walked up to her, holding a small notepad. "Are you a superhero?" the girl asked. Maya leaned down and smiled. "No," she whispered, "but I want you to feel like one." Maya Jensen stood on the rooftop of her small apartment building. Staring out at the quiet city, it was early morning, the sky still soft with the light of dawn. She held a cup of coffee in one hand, her other hand resting lightly on the rail. The world below was waking up slowly, but inside Maya, something deeper had already been awake for years. Everyone saw her calm face. They saw the quiet warrior, the patient teacher, the woman who forgave the man who elbowed her, but no one truly knew what that calm had cost her. Because behind her silence were battles no one could see, and wounds no doctor could stitch. She remembered the years spent in war zones, dusty villages, echoing gunfire, nights without sleep. She remembered carrying her wounded teammate on her back for 4 hours through enemy fire. She remembered standing in the rain during an ambush, blood soaking through her uniform, and choosing to keep moving. She had been trained to keep her heart still while chaos danced around her. She had seen young lives lost in seconds, friends who laughed at breakfast but never made it to dinner. That's why she didn't react when the man elbowed her. Not because she was afraid, but because she had seen real pain. And what he did wasn't strength. It was ignorance wrapped in muscle. The hardest part about coming home wasn't the quiet. It was learning how to live in it again. In the field, she had purpose, orders. Missions, teammates. At home, she had space, and too much of it. Some nights she would wake up gasping, not from dreams, but from the memory of silence in enemy territory. Silence used to mean danger. Now it meant peace, but her body still hadn't learned the difference. People said she was brave, but bravery wasn't about what she showed. It was about what she hid. She never told anyone how her hands used to shake when she touched door handles, or how she kept her furniture low to the ground, so she could duck easily if needed, or how she always sat with her back to the wall, scanning every room like she was still on patrol. The day she forgave the man, it wasn't an act of sainthood. It was a decision she made after fighting with herself in silence. Her old self wanted revenge, to teach them what pain really felt like. But her healed self whispered, "Show them who you really are." And that voice saved them all, including herself. A few days after the seminar, Maya was invited to speak at a local school. At first, she said no. She didn't think she had anything worth saying to kids who didn't know war. But then she remembered the girl who asked, "Are you a superhero?" And Maya realized something. Maybe her calm face wasn't just a shield. Maybe it was a bridge. At the school, she stood before a room of teenagers, their attention half on their phones. But when she started speaking one by one, their eyes lifted. She told them about fear, not just in war, but in life. "The bravest thing I ever did," she said, "was ask for help." She told them about her brother, how he had died in a street fight when he refused to walk away. He thought turning his back meant weakness, she said softly. But it takes more strength to walk away with your head up than to stay and fight without reason. The room went quiet. Some students cried, others lowered their heads. And when she finished, one boy stood up and said, "Thank you. I needed to hear that." Later, the school principal told Maya something that stayed with her. "One of the boys in that room had planned to confront someone violently this week," he said. "He just told me he's not going anymore because of your story." Maya didn't smile big, just nodded once, because sometimes one life saved is more powerful than 1,000 battles won. That night, Maya sat on her balcony, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked up at the stars, letting the wind brush her face. Her phone buzzed, an email from a mother who had attended her seminar. It read, "My daughter sleeps peacefully now because she says you taught her how to be strong." Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. This was the life she never expected, not one of medals and missions, but one of small moments and quiet change. And behind that calm face, behind every breath, every step, every pause, was a woman who had seen war, but chose to build peace not with weapons but with wisdom. The gym was different now. It didn't just smell like sweat and rubber mats, it felt like something sacred had happened inside those walls. People came in quietly, heads high but hearts open. Even the music had changed, softer, slower, more respectful. And at the center of it all was one name that echoed in every corner, Maya Jensen. But this chapter wasn't about Maya anymore. This chapter was about the men who once laughed. The ones who elbowed, mocked, and smirked. Because their story didn't end with shame. It was only just beginning with something rare and hard to earn. True regret. Chris, the tallest of the four, hadn't returned to the gym for 3 days after Maya's first seminar. He stayed home rewatching the video in silence. Not the one of the elbow, but the one where she forgave him. He couldn't sleep. He thought about his younger sister and how he would have reacted if someone had done that to her. He thought about his late father, a former Marine who had once told him, "Real men don't raise fists. They raise standards." On the 4th day, Chris walked back into the gym. No camera crews, no followers, no friends. Just a quiet man wearing a plain t-shirt and holding something in his hands, an apology letter. He waited until Maya finished her class. She walked toward her water bottle, tired but graceful. He approached slowly and said, "May I?" She looked up, nodded once, and let him speak. "I didn't know who you were," he said, voice shaking. "But now I realize that was never the point. I didn't need to know your background to treat you with respect. I failed as a man that day." He handed her the letter and said nothing else. Maya took it gently, nodded again, and replied, "It takes more courage to admit you were wrong than to pretend you were right." That simple exchange changed him forever. Chris didn't just walk away with guilt. He walked away with a mission. He signed up for Maya's weekend self-defense boot camp, not to show off, but to listen and learn. He volunteered to be the sparring dummy so others could train safely. He offered to wipe down mats, hand out water bottles, and stay late to clean the place, people noticed. But more importantly, they believed it. Another man from the group, Tyler, was quieter. He hadn't even elbowed Maya. He just stood there and laughed. But his regret ran deep, he told his friends later. "I didn't throw a punch, but I let it happen, and that makes me just as guilty." He wrote a long post online, admitting his role and sharing what he had learned from Maya. It went viral, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest, and sometimes honesty spreads faster than hate. Soon other men started reaching out, not just from that gym, but from across the city. They asked Maya if they could join the boot camp too. She welcomed everyone with one condition: Leave your ego at the door, she said. Pick up discipline instead. The boot camps turned into something much bigger than training. They became healing grounds. Men who had never cried in front of anyone shared their fears. Women who had felt unsafe for years finally found their voices. And the person who held them all together was Maya, quiet, calm, unshaken. A local news crew did a story on it. They called it the apology movement. One line from the interview stood out to everyone. Maya said, "I don't want revenge, I want ripple effects. I want the man who hurt me to become the man who protects someone else tomorrow." That ripple reached far. One high school invited Maya and Chris to speak to their students. Chris stood beside her and told the room, "I thought being strong meant being loud, but real strength is silent. Real strength is when you look someone in the eyes and say, 'I'm sorry.'" The audience gave them a standing ovation. Not because of a perfect story, but because of a real one. Maya didn't keep count of how many men changed. She didn't need numbers. She saw it in their eyes, their posture, the way they treated others. Even the gym staff began changing the posters on the walls. No more flexing poses, now they featured quotes like, "Lead with grace and protect, don't provoke one day." A young boy came up to Maya during a class. He looked nervous and held a picture he drew. It showed a woman standing in front of a group of scared people. She wasn't punching, she was reaching out her hand. He said, "That's you, saving everyone." Maya knelt down and replied, "No, sweetie, I'm just showing them they can save themselves." And in that moment, she realized this was the change she never knew the world needed. Not louder voices, but better hearts. Not tighter fists, but open hands. 1 year later, the gym didn't look the same. The machines were still there, the weights still clanged. But something invisible had changed the entire atmosphere. It wasn't just a place to build muscles anymore. It had become a place to build character. Maya Jensen no longer walked in unnoticed. But she still walked in the same way, quiet, grounded, no fanfare. People stood taller when she entered. Not out of fear, but out of deep respect. She didn't seek attention, but it followed her. Like gravity follows the earth, her self-defense classes had turned into a full program called Face Forward. A name she chose because, in her words, if you're going to move forward, you have to face what's behind you first. The program now helped women, veterans, teens, and even ex-offenders. Anyone who wanted to learn how to protect not just their bodies, but their peace. The man who once elbowed her in the face was now one of the most dedicated volunteers. Chris spent weekends teaching basic safety to teenage boys in tough neighborhoods. He told them his own story, the mistake he made, and the woman who didn't destroy him but redeemed him. He often said, "She didn't knock me down. She lifted me up by letting me fall on my own." Tyler, the quiet one, now ran a podcast called Redefining Strength. He interviewed soldiers, survivors, and ordinary people who made extraordinary choices. Maya was his first guest. That episode became the most shared interview of the year. It wasn't loud. It was real. One school principal invited Maya to speak at a national education summit. She stood on stage in front of thousands of teachers and counselors, not with a slideshow or fancy words, just her calm voice and powerful presence. She told them, "You're not just teaching math or history. You're teaching kids how to stand up, first for themselves, then for others." By now, the video of her original gym encounter had been viewed over 50 million times, but she never watched it again. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't define her. What defined her were the letters she received. A girl in India wrote, "I stopped blaming myself after watching you," a mother in Brazil said. "My daughter finally joined karate because of you," a teenage boy in Detroit wrote. "I almost hurt someone last year. Now I mentor kids instead." Maya kept those letters in a small wooden box by her bed. She didn't need medals, she had moments. The gym where it all began now had a mural painted on one wall. It showed a woman standing calmly, her shadow behind her shaped like a lion. Below it were the words, "Silent but unshaken," drawn by the same young boy who had once handed Maya a picture in class. Even the media couldn't ignore her anymore. She was honored at a national event with the Civilian Courage Award. As she stood on the stage, lights flashing and cameras rolling, she gave the shortest speech of the night. "I didn't come here to be known. I came here to remind people of what they forgot. That stillness is not weakness, and forgiveness is not surrender." That line was quoted in books, classrooms, and even courtrooms. Judges began offering her program to first-time offenders. Parents asked for her advice on raising kind yet strong children. Therapists invited her to speak on trauma healing. What started with pain had grown into purpose. One late evening, Maya returned to the rooftop of her apartment, the same place where she once wondered if she still belonged. Now she looked at the city with softer eyes, not because the world had changed, but because she had changed it. She sat on a chair sipping warm tea. Next to her was an old photo of her SEAL team, and beside that, one more item, the elbow-shaped scar near her cheek. Now almost gone, it had faded, but the lesson had not. A soft knock came at her door downstairs. It was a young woman, maybe 20. She looked nervous and said, "Are you Maya? I saw your story. Can you teach me how to feel safe again?" Maya opened the door wider and smiled. "Come in," she said. "We'll start with breathing. Then we'll talk about walking with your head high. After that, we'll teach your heart to stop apologizing for taking space." The girl nodded, tears in her eyes, and just like that, another legacy began, not in headlines or videos, but in a single room with two women, one who had survived and one who now would.